Today we have with us none other than the Chief Justice of India, Dr. CJI Chandrachud with us, and the head of the Indian judiciary, who is on a mission mode 24/7 and who has already in his 20 months of Chief Justiceship has revolutionized the way the Indian judiciary functions, and has been already his 20-month tenure as Chief Justice has already been an action-packed period with dramatic changes institutionally, judicially, administratively, and also infrastructurally, infrastructure-wise, right from the subordinate courts to Supreme Court is there for all to see. And also, and all this amidst pronouncing landmark judgments in the arena of especially personal liberty, women's rights, human rights, gender and social equality, rights of the disabled, and protection of environment. Justice Chandrachud, thank you for speaking to Times Now.
Thank you.
So it seems you have decided to declare a war on the pendency, especially in the Supreme Court. Unprecedented 6-day long lokadalat has been planned. Can you please elaborate on the aims, objectives of the lokadalat?
Well, the lokadalat, which has been convened by the Supreme Court from the 29th of July to the 3rd of August, is a collaborative effort between the judges of the Supreme Court and the bar of the Supreme Court. So obviously we have the cooperation of the members of the bar, and it is with their active cooperation and the cooperation of the litigants that we can aspire to dispose of as many cases in a purely voluntary and consensual mode. As distinct from the work which we do in court, which is to deliver judgments and to decide cases, lokadalats are basically a very simple way of resolving cases to the mutual satisfaction of all contesting parties. Some of my senior judges, some of my senior colleagues in the Supreme Court have been very closely associated with the process with me. So it's a team effort. Now we have selected cases which concern common citizens. To give you just a few examples, we are taking up cases involving motor accidents, compensation, land acquisition cases, labor cases, service cases, cases relating to the consumer protection law. So these are essentially cases which concern the lives of common citizens. And we thought that we must focus on these cases so that by delivering justice in a purely consensual and voluntary mode to our citizens, we'd be able to reduce the backlog of the Supreme Court. But more important than just reducing the statistical backlog, we'd be able to deliver quality justice to citizens. Because in many of these cases, citizens are not really in that sense as concerned with the ultimate judgment which is delivered as compared to the relief which is granted to them. You can imagine somebody who has died in a motor accident, vehicular accident. Now, the members of the family who are waiting for years for compensation, they can be substantially compensated by the lokadalat. So we have also engaged with the insurance companies. We have engaged with the high courts across India. We have been engaging with the state governments. So all in all, this is a multi-tiered approach to dispute resolution that the Supreme Court has adopted. And by convening this lokadalat, the overall message which, as the head of the judiciary, I want to convey is that we stand with the people and our heart is with our citizens in an effort to bring justice to them. Well, the registry identified about 10,000 cases to start with, which we believed had elements of a settlement. And what we have done is that once these 10,000 cases were identified, we have, through the members of the bar and by using the good offices of the high courts, contacted the citizens down to the lowest geographic level, namely the villages and the talukas. And through the legal services authorities, we are eliciting the consent of citizens so that their cases can be listed before the lokadalat. So during the course of this week, the week-long lokadalat, we'd hope to ensure that as many of the cases that we had identified can actually be listed. that process will go on right up to the previous day of the lokadalat. So we are being very flexible. Even if a party comes to us on the eve of the lokadalat and says that they would like to settle their case, we are more than open to settling those cases.
On a larger national level, the feeling is that the pendency can actually be brought down by increasing the population-judge ratio. The population ratio, which is among the lowest in the world, India's this ratio is among the lowest in the world. Anything on that, sir?
Well, yes, you're right. I mean, considering the amount of litigation which we have in India, it's important that the judge population ratio is increased. At the same time, just increasing the number of judges is not going to suffice. When you increase the number of judges, you must have a commensurate increase in the infrastructure. Increase in the infrastructure requires investment in infrastructure. Moreover, increase in judges must be matched by increases in the quality of judges. So it's not just the numerical increase in judges which ultimately counts, but an overall approach to improving the infrastructure, the courtrooms, the attendant facilities required for judges and lawyers and litigants who come to the court, and above all, emphasizing the quality of those who come into the judiciary.
So this Supreme Court and High Court judges are often criticized for taking long court vacations. In fact, what is your stand on it? In fact, this summer vacation had been a thumping success. The vacation courts had disposed of more than 1,170 cases. So has a strong message been sent across as far as the impression that judges take long vacations is concerned?
Well, the criticism that judges enjoy vacations is completely uninformed. I wish people would come and follow a day in the life of a judge across the district judiciary, the high courts, and the Supreme Court. For one thing, the work of a judge does not come to an end when we rise from the court. The work of a judge continues well after we rise from the court. For instance, in the evening, we have to spend the entire evening editing the orders which we had delivered in court. Thereafter, we have to read for the next day. There are cases where judgments have been reserved, so you have to sit down in your chambers or at home and dictate those judgments. My own experience over the last 24 years is that all judges work through the week. It's a 7-day week for all judges of the Supreme Court, and I dare say for the high courts and the district judiciary as well. Judges also perform other responsibilities such as convening legal aid clinics or the lokadalats. Our district judges do multifarious functions apart from just being judges. That's one aspect of the matter. In the higher courts, the second aspect of the matter is why do we have some of these vacations? Actually, calling them vacations is a misnomer. Even during the vacations, judges spend a good deal of time preparing the judgments which have been kept reserved. For instance, in the summer vacation, with just the summer recess which got over, I was working personally on judgments of the Constitution bench on which we have heard arguments and where we'll have to declare judgment. And the same applies to all my colleagues as well. So it's really not in that sense very correct to say that judges have vacations. Vacations meaning thereby that you are doing nothing apart from enjoying family time. It does not work that way. But apart from what I just told you, there's another aspect which I want to emphasize, and which is the radical change which has been brought about within the Supreme Court in the last 2 years. On an average, during vacation times, about 450, 460 cases would be disposed of in the summer recess, which is the longest recess which we have of about 6 weeks. This year, we had at least 3 benches operating, actually 3 benches operating almost every day of the working vacation, as a result of which we had close to 20 benches operating in the Supreme Court this time. The result was that about 1,170 cases have been actually disposed of by the Supreme Court during the course of the summer recess, and over 4,000 cases were listed before the court, which meant that the judges had to read the files of these 4,000 cases They heard arguments in a good number of these 4,000 cases, and they've actually disposed of close to over 1,100 cases, 1,170 cases to be precise. So this is a trend which I hope will continue. One last aspect of the issue of vacations which I have to emphasize is that there is a very important stakeholder in the judicial process, and that stakeholder is the bar itself. Now, lawyers need time off during the vacations also. The courts are not manned only by judges. The lawyers have a vital role in the judicial process. And the reason why lawyers need vacations, apart from the fact that they have family commitments, that they have their own responsibilities to their families, is the fact that lawyers, particularly in the Supreme Court, are lawyers who are drawn from the districts, from the states and the union territories across India. Now, the vacations are the time during which they need to link up with their own constituents, go back home, go back to their states, talk to people who brief them, discuss the cases which are going to come up in the near future, in the foreseeable future. And therefore, it's not just the judges who decide cases. We are also dependent on the cooperation of the bar, because this is really a collaborative endeavor. It's when lawyers argue cases that we can hear those cases and we can dispose them off. So all in all, we look very greatly to the cooperation of the bar in increasing our footprints even during the so-called vacations, which, as I explained, are not vacations in the sense of having free time. One final point, and that's really something which is equally fundamental. The work of a modern judge, and I dare say even more so today than say 25 or 30 years back, is also to reflect on the law, to read the law, to understand the way the law is evolving for the future. So even during the time when the court is not sitting during the summer or the winter periods, judges are constantly required to keep themselves abreast of new developments in the law. Judges therefore have to spend a great deal of time reflecting, understanding the new developments in the law, read on jurisprudence, read upon other judgments which have been delivered by the court to keep themselves abreast of the developments which are taking place in the law. And hence it is important that we give judges time to reflect on these seminal issues, both in law and life. Our court, our Supreme Court, works much more than almost every other Supreme Court in the world. In terms of sheer numbers, we deal with over 50,000 cases in a year. 34 judges of the Supreme Court deal with over 50,000 cases in a year. As opposed to that, in most other countries, judges of the Supreme Court would be dealing with maybe a couple of hundred cases at the most at the end of the year. So in terms of our volume, in terms of the number of cases which we handle, the work which we as judges of the Supreme Court do is unprecedented. On every Monday and Friday, an average bench of the Supreme Court deals with at least 60 or 70 cases, sometimes 80 cases or more. This kind of workload no other Supreme Court in the world carries. Therefore, we must understand that the nature of the work which our judges do has no parallel elsewhere in any other country in the world.
It seems the Lordship had actually drawn a plan out on how to utilize the 2-year stint as the Chief Justice of India to do the maximum as far as bringing judiciary closer to public, make Supreme Court more accessible to litigants by harnessing information technology, and also unprecedented infrastructure development in Supreme Court. Can your Lordship list some of the big measures taken and some of the work that has given you tremendous satisfaction?
Well, I must say at the outset that the Chief Justice of India is first and foremost, of course, a judge. Like all other judges, you sit in court, you hear arguments, and you decide cases. And the true worth of a Chief Justice is not just in terms of the administrative work which you do, but in terms of the kind of judgments that you deliver, the kind of justice that you deliver. So first and foremost, my focus has been not to lose focus on the core role of the Chief Justice, which is to dispense justice, to deliver justice and decide cases. Now, having said that, the Chief Justice, of course, is first among the equals, as it is said, and the head of the administration of the Supreme Court. And we have taken a huge number of measures to make the Supreme Court tech-friendly. There has, if I may say so, been a technological revolution in the Supreme Court, whether it's in terms of digitizing case records, whether it is in making paperless courts, whether it's in making e-filing. Now, an initiative like e-filing ensures that any lawyer or litigant can file cases 24/7 by 365 throughout the year in the Supreme Court. Apart from that, there are numerous new initiatives which have been adopted by the Supreme Court on the technology front. This includes an electronic pass system for accessing the Supreme Court, more transparent listing of cases before the Supreme Court. There's been new infrastructural growth which has been carried out within the Supreme Court and which is in the offering in the near future. We are in the process of constructing a futuristic building for the Supreme Court within the existing premises, which will take into account our needs for the next maybe 75, if not 100 years. But I think the key initiative really by us has been to take the work of the Supreme Court to the homes and to the lives of citizens. We have done that by live streaming important cases. Important cases, particularly in the context of the Constitution bench, are live streamed so that citizens can actually access what is being argued in the Supreme Court. What is the kind of work that the Supreme Court is doing? We have promoted video conferencing, so lawyers can today address the Supreme Court from all over the country, or for that matter from another part of the world, if they have the right of audience before the Supreme Court. What this has done really is to ensure that access to the Supreme Court has been democratized, and we have decentralized access to justice by allowing citizens from all parts of the country to understand what goes on within these four walls of the Supreme Court by following proceedings, by participating in proceedings, by giving them, in that sense, true access to justice in the work which is done by the Supreme Court.
Sir, you have been vigorously championing the cause of women empowerment, gender equality, social equality, disability rights of the differently able, and that is reflected in most of your judgments and orders. What is the motivating factor behind all this?
Well, I guess part of it is your own personal philosophy, but I don't really rest only with my own personal philosophy on these issues, because I believe the overarching philosophy which we as judges follow is the philosophy of the Constitution. So our Constitution mandates gender equality. Our Constitution, in emphasizing issues such as the dignity of human beings, speaks about the rights of the differently able. So the work which we are doing in terms of fostering greater gender equality is in terms of basic constitutional values which we have espoused. I wouldn't like to speak about my own judgments or the judgments which have been delivered by the Supreme Court, which is something which others should critique and understand. But we have been doing a lot of work on the ground in terms of improving access to justice. For instance, we have brought out a handbook on gender, which seeks to explain to lawyers and non-lawyers alike in very simple terms why legal discourse needs to be gender sensitive, and which are the terms in legal discourse which are perhaps insensitive to the concerns of a more equal society in terms of gender. We have also brought out a handbook on equality in relation to the rights of the differently abled. And I think in the work which we have done, our effort is therefore to make sure that the work of the court reaches out to different segments, including the marginalized groups in our society. Recently, we conducted an accessibility audit of the Supreme Court to try and see which are the areas in the operation of the Supreme Court which pose barriers to persons who have difficulty in gaining access because of their physical needs and requirements, and whether it's in terms of having a more accessible website of the Supreme Court, in substituting visual captures with captures which are accessible to people who have visual impairment in terms of the physical infrastructure which we provide and upgrading that infrastructure. Our effort has been to make the Supreme Court more accessible. As part of that initiative, we have set up a cafe, called the Mitti Cafe, which is entirely run by differently able citizens. And the idea about setting up this cafe was to bring focus on the needs, the requirements, and the presence of the differently abled citizens in our society, and to bring home the message to society at large that each of them is capable of living a dignified life on equal terms as the rest of society.
So one last question, what is the secret of your youthful look? In fact, you don't look like a judge who has to retire in 3.5 months, but who has many more years to go.
Well, a little bit of discipline, a little bit of genes, and a whole lot of good luck and blessings, I think.
And also supplementary questions are, how do you manage to keep this smile going, your smile going amidst all problems of the nation, including politically sensitive ones coming to court? A lot of politically sensitive cases also come to court.
Well, you've been trained over the last 2 decades that I've been a member of the legal profession. First, as a judge since 2000, and before that, when I was at the bar. And I have followed one mantra. I take my work seriously, but I don't take myself necessarily very seriously. And I think that really keeps me going, because I always look at the funny side of life, though I take my work very seriously.
Sir, any message from your side for the viewers of the Times Now?
Well, my message to viewers is that all of you should be very closely associated with the process of law and the process of justice, because it is in the realization of this process of law and justice that we ultimately realize the rights which are guaranteed to our citizens by the Constitution. So it's important that citizens are equally involved in the process of administering the law and dispensing justice, because just as courts and judges have an important role to play in the realization of justice, there's so much that the courts can do, but so much that lies beyond the court's power. And that's where civil society has a vital role in allowing for democracy and the essential values of a democracy to flourish.
Lordship, thank you so much for speaking to Times Now.
Thank you very much. Thanks.